For more than 30 years, the world believed it understood Andre Agassi. He was the rebel prince of tennis, the neon-clad icon who shattered tradition with every swing of his racket. While others wore white and whispered their way through country club courts, Agassi stormed in loud, emotional, unapologetic. He wasn't just winning matches, he was redefining what a tennis star looked like. But the truth is far more unsettling. Because while millions believed they were watching a fearless champion living his dream, Andre Agassi was quietly surviving a life he never chose, and hiding a version of himself he was terrified the world would discover. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Fame came early. Money followed fast. Endorsements poured in. Fans screamed his name across continents. Yet beneath the image of confidence was a young man suffocating under expectation, resentment, and a secret so personal it shaped every moment of his career. That secret began with something deceptively small. His hair. Agassi was losing it in his early 20s. In a sport obsessed with youth, strength, and image, baldness felt like exposure. Weakness. Failure. So he hid it. Not once. Not occasionally. But constantly. A carefully crafted hairpiece became part of his armor. Before matches, before interviews, before walking into public spaces, his first fear was never the opponent across the net. It was whether the disguise would hold. The crowd saw style. He felt fraud. Each match carried a second, silent battle. Not just forehands and backhands, but anxiety. What if it slipped? What if they saw the real him? What if the illusion collapsed? And that illusion wasn't just about hair. It was about everything. Because here is the truth that shocked the world when it finally emerged. Andre Agassi hated tennis. Not the pressure, not the travel, the sport itself. Tennis was never his dream. It was his father's obsession, forced into his hands before he could understand what choice meant. From childhood, Agassi was trained like a project, not a person. Success wasn't celebrated, it was expected. Losing wasn't a lesson, it was failure. So when the world cheered his victories, Agassi felt nothing but relief. Relief that he had survived another match, another expectation, another day living someone else's dream. That emotional fracture split his life in two. On the court, he was electric, fierce, iconic. Off the court, he was angry, exhausted, and deeply lost. Fame didn't expose this double life, it protected it. As long as he won, no one asked questions. As long as he smiled for cameras, the narrative stayed intact. But inside, the pressure kept building, and eventually, it demanded an escape. By the mid-1990s, the cracks became impossible to ignore. His ranking collapsed. His motivation evaporated. The sport that once made him famous now felt unbearable. And in that darkness, Agassi made a choice that could have ended everything. He turned to drugs. Not rebellion, not indulgence. Escape. For the first time, his mind went quiet. The noise stopped. The expectations faded. And for a brief, dangerous moment, he felt free. Then came the test. A failed drug test should have destroyed him. It should have ended his career, stripped his titles, exposed the truth. But instead, something remarkable and deeply troubling happened. Agassi wrote a letter. A lie. He blamed someone else. He explained away the evidence. And the system accepted it. The world never knew. So the double life continued. On television, Andre Agassi became the comeback story of the decade. The fallen star who rose again. The warrior who found his fire. Fans applauded his resilience, unaware that his greatest victory wasn't on the scoreboard. It was keeping the truth buried. Living like that takes a toll. Every interview became a performance. Every applause felt undeserved. Every success deepened the fear that one day it would all collapse. Even love couldn't survive the weight of that deception. His marriage to Brooke Shields looked flawless to the public, but behind closed doors it was volatile, tense, and emotionally unstable. Because you cannot share a life when you are hiding from yourself. By the time that chapter ended, Agassi was empty. Not defeated, but hollow. The image was intact. The legend survived. But the man underneath was fading. And this is where part of Moti ends. Because the most extraordinary part of Andre Agassi's story isn't the fall, the secrets, or the lies. It's what happens after he finally stops running. From tennis, from fame, and from himself. What comes next is not a comeback story. It's a reckoning. The collapse didn't come with a headline. There was no dramatic scandal, no public confession, no tearful press conference. Andre Agassi didn't fall apart in front of the world. He simply reached a point where he could no longer carry the weight of pretending. By the late 1990s, the lie had exhausted him. The rankings that once defined his worth no longer mattered. The endorsements felt hollow. Even the roar of the crowd, once intoxicating, now sounded distant, like applause meant for someone else. For the first time in his life, Agassi wasn't afraid of losing tennis. He was afraid of losing himself completely. And that fear forced a decision he had avoided since childhood. He stopped running. Agassi shaved his head. No disguise, no illusion, no armor. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was surrender, a quiet admission that the image he had built for decades no longer mattered. What shocked people later wasn't that he went bald. It was that he felt relief when he did. That was the first honest moment of his adult life. The second came when he finally admitted the truth, not to the world but to himself. Tennis was never love. It was obligation, control, fear. And until he faced that truth, he would never escape the cycle of self-destruction. Something changed after that realization. For the first time, Agassi chose to play tennis on his own terms. Not to please his father, not to satisfy the crowd, not to protect an image. He played because he decided to, because walking away would now be a choice, not an escape. That shift saved him. Slowly, painfully, he rebuilt his career from the bottom. Not with swagger, but with humility. Practice courts replaced nightclubs. Discipline replaced chaos. And without anyone noticing at first, Andre Agassi became something he had never been before. Honest. Then came the person who would see him without the mask. When Agassi met Steffi Graf, there was no explosion, no tabloid fantasy, no dramatic romance designed for cameras. What drew them together wasn't fame, it was recognition. Two champions shaped by pressure. Two people who understood what it meant to be owned by expectations. With Graf, Agassi didn't have to perform. There was no image to maintain, no role to play, no illusion to protect. For the first time, someone saw him not as a brand or a comeback story, but as a flawed man trying to become whole. Their relationship didn't fix him, but it gave him a reason to stop hiding. And that's when the final transformation began. Agassi didn't just return to the top of tennis. He returned as a different human being. The anger softened. The chaos disappeared. The desperation faded. Wins felt earned. Losses felt survivable. He had learned something he was never taught as a child, that his value didn't depend on victory. When he eventually walked away from tennis for good, there was no fear this time. No panic. No identity crisis. Because the sport no longer defined him. Years later, when Agassi finally told the truth in his autobiography, the world reacted with shock. Drugs, lies, self-loathing, hatred for the very game that made him famous. People asked how no one had seen it sooner. But the answer is simple. We didn't want to. We preferred the legend, the rebel, the champion, the highlight reel. We cheered the image because it made us feel inspired, never stopping to ask what it cost the man carrying it. Andre Agassi didn't live a double life because he was deceitful. He lived it because honesty wasn't safe for a child, for a star, for a product sold to millions. His story isn't about tennis. It's about what happens when success arrives before identity, when applause replaces love, when winning becomes survival. And in the end, the most powerful thing Andre Agassi ever did wasn't winning Grand Slams. It was telling the truth. Because sometimes the real victory isn't being the best in the world. It's finally becoming yourself. Andre Agassi's legacy isn't just defined by his tennis trophies or the dazzling moments on the court. It's shaped by what he did after he stopped playing. His retirement, far from being the quiet exit many expected, marked the beginning of his most significant transformation yet. This time, not as a player, but as a man determined to give back. After retiring from professional tennis in 2006, Agassi could have faded into the background, enjoying his wealth, his family, and the recognition that came with a Hall of Fame career. But Agassi wasn't content with the idea of simply being remembered for his wins. Instead, he decided to reshape his narrative, not through fame, but through service. He turned to something that was far more personal than tennis ever was. The Andre Agassi Foundation for Education became the centerpiece of his post-tennis life. What started as a small project to help underserved children in Las Vegas soon blossomed into one of the most impactful philanthropic efforts in the sport's history. Through the foundation, Agassi poured his resources into building a charter school for underprivileged children, giving them access to education that would have otherwise been out of reach. This was the moment when Agassi took the lessons of his life, the ones he learned the hard way, and used them to help others. He realized that success in tennis didn't mean anything if it wasn't used to uplift someone else. As he worked closely with the students at his school, he finally understood something that had eluded him for most of his career. Fulfillment doesn't come from achievement, but from purpose. And in giving back, Agassi found his true redemption. The athlete who once hated the sport he was forced to play became an advocate for the future of young people who, like him, had been dealt a difficult hand. In addition to his philanthropic work, Agassi's personal life found a sense of stability and peace he had never known. His marriage to Steffi Graf, who had once been his closest ally on the tennis circuit, proved to be his greatest source of strength. Together, they raised their children away from the glare of the spotlight, quietly building a family life grounded in love and mutual respect. This private, grounded life became a stark contrast to the years Agassi spent in the limelight, where his every move was scrutinized and commodified. But it wasn't just his foundation or his family that defined Agassi's legacy. It was the quiet, determined way he rebuilt himself. Not for the public, not for the press, but for himself. He found peace in the truth that he had avoided for so long. He was finally the person he had spent decades running from. Through his honesty, his transformation, and his work beyond tennis, Agassi taught us that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about embracing it. The flaws, the mistakes, the broken parts, they all become part of the person you're meant to be. And as he said himself, I don't look at tennis as something I'm proud of. I look at tennis as something that allowed me to be the person I am now. The double life he lived for so long wasn't one of deceit. It was a life built on fear. Fear of being seen as imperfect, of being exposed as less than the perfect champion everyone thought he was. It wasn't until he took off the mask, shaved his head, confessed the truth, and found new purpose, that Agassi could finally experience real freedom. His story isn't just about winning on the court. It's about winning at life, despite the odds, despite the struggles, and despite the pressure to conform. Because the real victory isn't about being the best in the world. It's about being the best for the world. And in that way, Andre Agassi didn't just become a champion. He became a true legend, not because of his matches or his records, but because of how he lived, how he gave back, and how he finally allowed himself to be real. As the years pass, Agassi's name will forever be synonymous with one of tennis's greatest, but his true legacy is one that transcends sport. His story is a reminder that the fight for self-acceptance is just as important as any championship. And in the end, he won the only match that truly matters, the match with himself. As the years after his retirement passed, Andre Agassi's legacy solidified, not just in the world of tennis, but in the hearts of those who had followed his journey from the beginning. His transition from the fiery, rebellious champion to a philanthropist and family man marked a unique and profound shift in the public's perception of him. What made Agassi's post-tennis life so remarkable wasn't just his involvement in charitable causes. It was the way he committed himself wholeheartedly to the work. His foundation was no longer just a charity. It became the very heart of his existence, a symbol of his growth and evolution. The man who had once seen fame as a burden now used it as a tool to change lives. Through his foundation, Agassi didn't just invest money. He invested time, energy, and his own heart. His commitment to providing education to children who were otherwise forgotten in the system reflected his desire to give others what he had never been able to find, a sense of agency and freedom. As Agassi's foundation blossomed, so did his relationship with his wife, Steffi Graf. The couple, once fierce competitors on the court, now found common ground in their shared mission to give back. Graf, who had stepped away from the spotlight years before Agassi's own retirement, was by his side every step of the way. Together, they created a legacy that wasn't just about sporting triumph, but about something much deeper. Their partnership showed the world that true success is not in what you achieve alone, but in what you build together. For the first time in his life, Andre Agassi was living on his own terms, not driven by fear, pressure, or public perception, but by love, purpose, and authenticity. As a father, Agassi took pride in raising his children with Steffi, keeping them grounded and away from the spotlight that had once consumed him. They didn't need the public's adoration. They didn't need the accolades. They needed stability and the ability to grow up as individuals without the constant noise of fame. But even in his more private life, Agassi remained a symbol of perseverance. His role as a father became just as important as his role as a philanthropist. He wanted to teach his children something he had never fully understood himself: that family, love, and authenticity are the true foundations of a fulfilling life. As Agassi continued to give back through his work and raise his family, he also took the time to reflect on his past and his relationship with tennis. He had come to terms with the fact that his career, once something that haunted him, was now something he could appreciate in its own right. The love-hate relationship he had with the sport became a source of understanding rather than regret. Tennis had given him a platform to impact the world in ways he had never imagined. It gave him his voice, and in return, he used it to ensure that others would have the chance to succeed on their own terms. In 2011, Agassi was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame, a crowning achievement in a career that had once been filled with both personal turmoil and triumph. But this honor wasn't just about his athletic achievements. It was a recognition of his resilience, his growth, and his contribution to the sport in ways far beyond the racket. When he walked in the Hall of Fame ceremony, there were no more illusions, no more facades. Andre Agassi stood there as the man he had become, a father, a philanthropist, a mentor, and a true champion of life. His legacy, in the end, is not written in numbers or titles. It's not the number of Grand Slam victories or the points he won. Agassi's legacy is defined by his willingness to be vulnerable, to face his own darkest fears, and to share those experiences with the world. He gave people permission to be imperfect, to fail, to rise again, and to be authentic. He didn't just teach us how to hit a forehand or how to win a match. He taught us how to face the hardest parts of ourselves and turn them into our greatest strengths. As Agassi's life continues to unfold, one thing is clear: the story of Andre Agassi is far from over. The man who once lived a double life has now become a beacon of hope, proving that the hardest battles we face are often the ones we fight within ourselves. And in that fight, Andre Agassi has emerged victorious, not just as a tennis legend, but as a man who, in the end, found peace with himself and with the world around him. As the years passed since Andre Agassi's retirement from tennis, his journey didn't simply end with charity work and family life. His personal transformation took root and blossomed into a legacy that transcends sports. Agassi, now more than ever, became a living example of resilience, not just through his victories on the tennis court, but in the way he fought to build a life filled with integrity, purpose, and authenticity. Perhaps one of the most significant aspects of Agassi's evolution is his unwavering commitment to education and youth empowerment. His Andre Agassi Foundation, which began as a modest project, grew into something far greater than he could have ever imagined. While many celebrities launch foundations, Agassi's hands-on involvement set his efforts apart. His Agassi College Preparatory Academy in Las Vegas became a beacon of hope for kids in underserved communities. Agassi didn't just donate money. He gave his time, attention, and heart to a cause that was deeply personal. These children were given not only the resources, but the opportunity to break the cycle of poverty and achieve success. This was his redemption. Tennis had taken everything from him, but through his foundation, Agassi gave back everything he had learned through his own struggles. His mission wasn't only to change lives in the classroom. It was to equip these young people with the tools to create their own future, just as he had done through his tennis career, though in a much more meaningful way. But it wasn't just the academy or the charitable work that marked Agassi's post-retirement life. The man who once lived in the shadow of fame, conflicted between who he was and who the world wanted him to be, finally stood in the light of who he truly was. A man who had faced personal demons, battled self-doubt, struggled with his public persona, and yet emerged as a true legend, not only on the court but in life. When Agassi first retired, there was a part of him that feared being forgotten, fearing that without tennis, he would lose his sense of self. But as he embraced his family life with Steffi Graf and their children, he realized that true success wasn't in trophies or accolades. It was in the love and support of those closest to him. Their relationship wasn't just a partnership. It was a powerful reminder that after all the struggles, some things are worth fighting for. Steffi Graf, the tennis legend in her own right, played a pivotal role in his journey to self-acceptance. Together, they created a life far removed from the constant media circus, teaching their children to appreciate the value of a quiet, fulfilling life. Despite being one of the most famous power couples in sports history, they prioritized their family's privacy and stability above all else. This personal shift wasn't just about stepping away from tennis. It was about forging a life that was his own, not built around the public's expectations. It was about finding inner peace, healing wounds that tennis could never heal, and sharing that peace with his loved ones. Today, when Andre Agassi looks back on his career, he doesn't see the champion with Grand Slam titles or the flamboyant figure who once shook up tennis fashion. Instead, he reflects on the journey, the painful years of hiding, the anger, the addiction, and the struggle to find meaning beyond the racket. Through the highs and lows, he's come to understand that his legacy isn't defined by his victories on the court. His legacy is one of resilience. It's about facing your darkest fears, owning your mistakes, and using those experiences to build something meaningful. He's not only remembered as one of the greatest tennis players of all time, but also as a man who redefined what it means to be a champion. In his later years, Agassi has become a symbol of personal growth. His public reckoning didn't just inspire tennis fans. It inspired anyone who has ever struggled with their identity, their past, or their sense of purpose. His story teaches us that success is not a straight line, and sometimes the most painful struggles lead to the most profound transformations. Through his foundation, his family life, and his reflection on the man he used to be, Andre Agassi has proven that even the most painful chapters can lead to a story of hope, renewal, and redemption. As Andre Agassi continues his life post-tennis, the story of his transformation is far from finished. While many may think of him as a retired athlete, the truth is that Agassi's journey is ongoing. The life he's built since hanging up his racket has reshaped what it means to be a public figure, and his voice has grown even more powerful over time. Today, Agassi's work continues to make a difference, especially in the world of education, where he has become an advocate for systemic change. His foundation has expanded its reach, and his commitment to helping underprivileged children goes beyond just offering opportunities for a better education. Agassi has used his platform to campaign for lasting change in education policy, ensuring that children who grow up in challenging circumstances get the same opportunities to succeed as anyone else. Agassi's philanthropic efforts have shown the world that his heart was never fully in tennis, not in the way the world thought. His heart belonged to the future of young people who needed someone to believe in them as much as he needed someone to believe in him when he was at his lowest. He had to live through a double life, but now he lives openly and boldly, advocating for the kind of opportunities he never had as a child. What's more inspiring is that Agassi isn't alone in this new wave of athlete philanthropists. He has become a role model for a new generation of sports stars who aren't defined by just their athletic achievements, but by how they use their platform to create change in the world. The new athlete is one who understands that their purpose stretches beyond the game they play. For Agassi, this transformation into an advocate for change shows just how far he has come. No longer does he feel defined by the world's expectations of him as a tennis player. Instead, he has created a new definition of himself, one that aligns with his true values and purpose. Looking to the future, Andre Agassi continues to make an impact. His commitment to youth education, his advocacy for reforms in education, and his drive to create opportunities for children who are left behind by society will leave an imprint long after his career in tennis is a distant memory. In the coming years, his voice will continue to be heard, whether in the political space, through his charitable work, or simply through the lives of those he's helped. Though Agassi has removed himself from the limelight of tennis, he will forever be remembered as someone who fought for himself, for others, and for the future. His story isn't about winning titles, though he did that more than most. It's about winning in life. It's about finding peace and purpose after years of internal struggle. And it's about realizing that sometimes the greatest victories come not on the court, but off it. As time passes, Andre Agassi's life will continue to inspire those who face their own battles with identity, fame, and purpose. His legacy is not defined by a single triumph or defeat. It's defined by the humanity he brought to every stage of his journey. From a young rebel on the court to the seasoned advocate for change, Agassi is proof that true victory lies not in what you win, but in who you become. Through his struggles, his triumphs, and his willingness to face both the good and the bad, Andre Agassi has become something far more lasting than a tennis icon. He has become a symbol of redemption, not just for himself, but for anyone who dares to face their own demons, seek forgiveness, and ultimately find the strength to rise. And as his journey continues to unfold, we all have a chance to learn from his example. That even in the darkest moments, there's a path forward, and the next chapter of our lives may hold the greatest story yet to be written. As Andre Agassi moves further into his post-tennis life, his narrative is no longer shaped by victories or losses on the court, but by the lasting impact he has made in the lives of others. His journey is a profound reminder that even the most iconic sports figures, the ones who seem to have it all, are not immune to personal struggles. And perhaps it is in embracing those struggles and turning them into opportunities for growth that Agassi's legacy has become more than just about sports. It's about life, its trials, and its ultimate triumphs. In the years following his retirement, Agassi continued to evolve, not only in his role as a philanthropist, but also as a man who came to fully accept the complexity of his past. His marriage to Steffi Graf, which had been a private source of strength and stability, blossomed as they became one of the most influential couples in sports history. But unlike the high-profile, publicized relationships in the celebrity world, theirs was different. It was grounded in shared experiences, mutual respect, and a deep understanding of the pressures that came with being at the top. For Agassi, his relationship with Steffi wasn't just a partnership in marriage. It became an anchor in his ongoing quest to understand and forgive himself. Together, they raised their children in an environment away from the prying eyes of the media, focusing on giving them a sense of normalcy, peace, and the tools to shape their own futures. The greatest part of Agassi's journey is how he found peace after stepping away from the sport that had once consumed him. Tennis was no longer the center of his world. It had served its purpose as a vessel for personal discovery, and now it was time for him to redefine himself. Agassi began to find joy in the simplest of moments, watching his children grow, working on projects with his foundation, and spending time with his loved ones. Though he was no longer playing the sport he had once ruled, Agassi's influence in tennis remained. His stories serve as a source of inspiration for athletes who found themselves at the crossroads of fame, identity, and purpose. He became a mentor, not just to younger players, but to anyone who struggled to reconcile their past with their future. And in his reflections on his life and career, Agassi began to see tennis not as a burden, but as something that had allowed him to reach a level of self-understanding that he could never have achieved without it. He had come to terms with the fact that his flaws and failures were as integral to his success as the triumphs. They weren't something to hide or be ashamed of, but rather, they were the very foundation of his resilience. Perhaps one of the most profound aspects of Agassi's legacy is his focus on education, something that has become a central tenet of his life's work. Through the Agassi Foundation, he has dedicated his resources to giving children access to quality education, believing that it is the key to breaking the cycles of poverty and despair that many face. Agassi has often spoken about his belief that education is the true equalizer, offering young people the chance to escape the confines of their circumstances and create their own destinies. In many ways, Agassi's role as an advocate for education mirrors the battles he fought on the tennis court, fighting not just to win, but to bring about real, lasting change. His personal story has shown how powerful the combination of determination, compassion, and a willingness to change can be in creating a new path for those who might not have had a chance otherwise. Agassi's commitment to education wasn't born from a sense of duty alone, though. It was deeply personal. As someone who had been shaped by the influence of his father, who pushed him relentlessly to succeed, Agassi understood firsthand the impact that a good education can have, not just in terms of knowledge, but in giving someone a sense of empowerment and choice. As we look at Andre Agassi today, it's clear that his story isn't over. It's simply evolved. His achievements on the tennis court will always be part of his identity, but the person he has become is what truly defines him. The Agassi of today is one who has embraced every part of himself, flaws and all, and used his journey to create a meaningful impact. He is a father, a husband, a philanthropist, and an advocate who has continued to inspire, not just with his victories, but with his willingness to confront his past and shape a future based on what truly matters. In a world that often worships perfection and celebrates the image of invincibility, Agassi's life is a testament to the power of vulnerability. His transformation, from a young, rebellious star to a deeply reflective man of purpose, reminds us that greatness is not about avoiding mistakes or pretending to be flawless. It's about embracing the full spectrum of life, learning from every experience, and using those lessons to become the best version of oneself. Through it all, Agassi's journey continues to inspire not just athletes or tennis fans, but anyone who has ever faced hardship, doubt, or uncertainty. In the end, his greatest victory wasn't the trophies he collected, but the life he built after stepping away from the sport.